Hi, thanks for joining us today. We have Microbix presenting. Cameron Groom, CEO, is here. He's going to walk us through some of the new product developments they've had, as well as the recent government grant that they received. So it's a very exciting time for Microbix. I'm happy to have Cameron back to walk us through some of the finer points. As always, there will be a Q&A section at the end. If you have questions, just feel free to submit them in the Q&A box. And this presentation will contain forward-looking statements. You can find those in the company's disclosure in their presentation on the website. And with that out of the way, Cameron, thanks for joining us again.
Thank you very much, Deborah. It's a pleasure to be here this morning with everyone. And as you said, there's quite a bit going on that's exciting at Microbix. We've been working very, very hard to make a lot of things happening, and I'm very pleased to run through those and describe them to everyone on the call today. So thank you. As Deborah mentioned, we will have some forward-looking statements. I like to have a very short or safe harbor statement, but you all get the point. As you know, we do a lot in the biological space and are very specialized in infectious diseases, and it's that viral and cell culturing work that's leading us to many opportunities and driving really the transformation of Microbix from a maker of testing supplies that were unbranded and relatively anonymous to a creator of proprietary and branded medical devices. And we're now up to, of course, 10 registered / licensed medical devices, and I expect we'll be adding a number more over the next 6 and 12 months. We're targeting moving to a run rate of 6 new medical devices product introductions every year. We're not there yet by any means, but certainly we're provisioning ourselves, and as our sales and our cash generation increases, we're gearing to be able to do just that. So what we have is, of course, sales starting to accelerate, particularly on our swab-based quality assessment products, or QAPs, and as well driven by a stunning opportunity in the very near term in providing viral transport media, or VTM. And we'll discuss what that means in terms of the Ontario grant and just the scope of that opportunity. So we're really working to advance from a base of sales on the order of $1 million a month currently to move towards tripling that. And that looks very attainable in the near term, and we'll describe a little bit more around why. Management team, you're stuck with me this morning, but we have incredible bench strength within our company. Myself, Jim Curry, our CFO, Ken Hughes, our COO, Phil Caselli in Sales and Business Development, Mark Lucier, SVP Scientific Affairs, Kevin Cassidy, Biopharmaceuticals, and I can go right through a list even longer than this of people that don't appear on the more C-level oriented slides, but are just fantastic professionals. So I can't say enough about our team at every level of management. And a tremendous staff as well. We're at about 80 professionals currently, and that will creep up but not explode for we want to really drive margin for the company. The board of directors, some of you may know that our founding chairman, Bill Gassel, just retired, and we have moved forward with Martin Marino, who was our audit committee chair, becoming independent chairman, and Von Embro Pantaloni, my predecessor, becoming chair of the audit committee. We also have Mark Cochran, who's just retired from Johns Hopkins as executive director, Joe Renner, who's chairman of Zydus, Peter Bletcher, a very prominent life sciences entrepreneur and MD. So we have an excellent board supervising these matters. Capitalization, market cap, we're bouncing around in the high 20s, low 30s billions of dollars Canadian, and we certainly see that as advancing quite dramatically from a capitalization point of view in the near term. We had to lock down with a special blackout in relation to the viral transport media project with Ontario in relation to the Mgen new product introduction and in relation to the announcement of our COVID antigen controls that will likely be released in the coming days, and you'll certainly see me as a buyer and possibly other people in the executive management as well. So we're putting our money where our mouth is. I'm going to talk a little bit more about the 3 sales-driven divisions now, because the viral transport media for pandemic testing is really going to become a real revenue driver of the business very, very quickly. And these now are gearing to be equally significant from a revenue perspective. So I'm becoming comfortable suggesting an exit rate for fiscal 2021 that might be on the order of $3 million a month from the current $1 million. And this is based on really substantial opportunities in all 3 areas. Our antigen production has been under pressure this year as many patients just aren't going to doctors or hospitals for normal testing. And it's really COVID all the time on every channel. So that's pushed down our antigen sales this year from the run rate that we had been experiencing. And it's also slowed the growth in some respects of our quality assessment products. Well, we generated the leading products for support of COVID-19 testing. Some of the matters we positioned for example, in our leading HPV controls, have certainly been slowed in their uptake due to the understandable emphasis of health systems on COVID-19 testing. And we've also identified this tremendous opportunity to become the leading provider of viral transport media for the province of Ontario. And I'll describe a little bit what that means in terms of the unit volumes, in terms of the economics, in terms of the timelines. And this is squarely within our core competencies. We already make tens of thousands of liters of extremely complex media every year as a part of our viral antigen and production and cell culture to support that. So it's squarely within our core competencies, and it's also squarely within the medical devices license, medical devices establishment license that we secured this spring. Viral transport media is classed as a low risk or class 1 medical device and can be readily licensed by us under the quality accreditations and licenses we already have. So we'll talk a little bit about the timelines of that and the near-term consequences of it. I won't spend a lot of time on the slides of the antigen business. I think everybody's pretty familiar with what Microbix does in this respect. But this is the foundation that has enabled us to create QAPs, that has enabled us to create VTM. It's still a very important business for us, where we've been spending a lot of time and effort to move the margins in this business up to a more acceptable level, and to also enable us to be able to scale indefinitely as we see more sophisticated testing rolling out to new growth markets, such as in the Asia Pacific. So it's been very good. And we have, of course, a whole catalog of products and capabilities to work with all these different organisms that enables us to create leading edge QAPs and to embark on this VTM project with Ontario. We're going to see, and we're already seeing in the current quarter, that we're in a resumption of more normalized antigen sales. And the work that we've done with our bioreactor technologies means that we can scale our production without having to scale our footprint or our staffing, which provides some very real advantages. And of course, having all our library of cell lines and viral strains that are clean title and royalty free, held by us, gives us tremendous production advantages there as well. Beyond the immunoassays and the antigen sales is, of course, our QAPs products. And these are the quality assessment products that enable us to help with the proficiency testing and accreditation of the competency of laboratories through the international agencies that do that. We're a huge supplier, volume supplier to them of white labeled caps for those programs. And we've more recently moved to provide other flavors of those products to the test developers to support the installation, validation of new systems and training of technicians. And then, of course, the bookending of clinical laboratory test runs to ensure their support. But all this wouldn't be possible without all the expertise that we've built up in our antigen business that enable us to really be technology leaders in the production of caps. And the three segments, there are a few changes on this slide. And one of the real changes is we previously looked at the proceed line, the intermediate flavor of these products, as a more modest opportunity. And as I was updating this for this presentation, I've changed that proceed from greater than 2 million to greater than 10 million, because we're already moving to exceed the run rate of 2 million. And we viewed that as really a means to gain profile and access to the clinical laboratory industry for the fully regulated Red Controls brand of product, which is inarguably a very large opportunity. But we're seeing off the charts engagement with leading laboratory test manufacturers that need the support of our controls, not just for COVID-19, but for respiratory testing broadly as testing moves into more syndromic orientation, where people are looking to know not just whether it's COVID that somebody is causing the respiratory symptoms, but whether it's COVID or flu A or flu B or RSV or another cause. Smart manufacturers are moving into multiplex testing as rapidly as they can, and our controls are very well positioned to support that transition. And we're seeing some tremendous engagement and uptake on that level, which is quite encouraging. I think we'll all as shareholders benefit from that. So those changes are moving along, and you can see the proficiency testing began some years ago. White label products, very much more price sensitive, non-regulated, and sales have plateaued at about $1 million a year due to lack of new product introductions principally. And then in 2018, we began to offer these sophisticated products to the OEM test makers and had some early adopters providing, for example, a starter kit of Microbix controls with every installation. But those were relatively low volume at that time. But sales are certainly now becoming meaningful. And then beginning in 2020, we had registered our first formal medical device products in the fall of 2019, began building international distribution leading into the pandemic. And of course, closing business deals in the middle of a pandemic adds an extra layer of challenge. But we successfully did that with 5 formal distribution agreements and began providing product to the US and EU through those distributors in June 2020. So we're still relatively early days in those introductions, but the results are certainly satisfactory. So, when we look at those, where are we? We've moved forward with Proceed, we've moved forward with Red, but sales are we're still relatively modest through our fiscal 2020, although still up quite dramatically year over year. The level of materiality is somewhat lower, but we're seeing certainly some dramatic pickup. And what we've done with CAPS in 2020, we were very prompt in recognizing the potential of the outbreak of SARS-CoV-2 virus that was being downplayed in January and February, that was smelling like a pandemic. And we began development of a quality assessment products, vials and swabs to support the nucleic acid amplification testing, PCR testing, if you will, for COVID-19 before the pandemic was even declared as such. And in the spring, we announced that we'd externally validated our prototype. In April, we received our medical devices establishment license from Health Canada. In May, we secured FDA registration. In June, we received our CE mark. And of course, you know, it's not thought too much about the logistics and importation licenses and permits and shipping criteria for moving out some of these products. So we actually only we're only able to begin providing our COVID-19 controls to our distributors in Europe on or about June 15th, and our US distributor only received its first shipment on June 30th. So you can see how with a Q3 quarter end of June 30, you essentially stocked the distributors in Q3, and they were sampling through Q4, and you only saw the beginnings of reorders in Q4. But a very now incredibly well-recognized product that's being adopted by global proficiency testing accreditation providers and is well-recognized now by the who's who of the diagnostics industry. And this engagement is just incredible for us. I can't overemphasize the strategic importance of that in changing it from, you know, what the hell is a Microbix to, oh my gosh, you guys can actually do this. And we've taken that forward to follow up with the creation of a second form of controls for COVID-19 testing, namely controls for the emerging antigen tests for COVID-19. These are the quicker and dirtier form of quickly testing for COVID-19 disease, still using the nasopharyngeal swabs that you see on the news now every night. But these tests can be either run on an instrument or they can be run as a little immunochromatography strip test. I'll grab one from my credentials just to show that example. So this, for example, is the Abbott Binax Now antigen test. It's a card format where there's actually an immunochromatography strip. The swab sample taken out of somebody's nose is mixed in with a test-specific reagent. Some of that reagent is then pipetted up into a fixed volume. That volume is then applied to the strip on the test. It moves along and provides a response. Our control can actually behave exactly like a patient sample. You put in the liquid sloshed around, applied directly to the test. And this is, in some cases, similar to our COVID-19 swab controls. They are often the only control available that will work on these more rapid point-of-care tests, which again just speaks to the level of connectivity we're generating and the importance of the work we're doing. And on the 20th of October, just the other day, yesterday in fact, we announced not just the creation of this product, but that we've already sold well over 1,000 units of the prototype to be used by international lab accreditation agencies in labs all over the United States and Europe to confirm their widespread applicability. And we fully expect these initial pilot runs in the PT industry will follow with full-scale accreditation programs that will be 5 to 10 times that scale, run multiple times per year to provide the training and accreditation to laboratories that they know what they're doing with the instrument-based or portable COVID-19 antigen tests. And we've proven already that our COVID-19 nucleic acid test controls work across, we presented at the ECVID industry conference that they work across 15 different companies' tests, and we've since validated that they work across about 50 companies' different tests. So this is a very key component of what Microbix does, is that our controls are not linked to any specific test. They're designed to work on anybody's test. And that's an incredible addition to the provision of further support to the quality systems of labs that are running in this quite a situation of madness. And you can see this is an advertisement advertorial we placed in the College of American Pathology today, describing the use of Microbix controls to maintain a little sanity amid insane level of testing demand for COVID in the clinical laboratory space. We haven't been simply limited to respiratory or COVID, however, and it's just worth mentioning that we look well on these, but we've also developed products that are going to be incredibly important in a post-COVID world. With all of the added installed base of clinical laboratory systems, those aren't going to be just thrown in a trash heap as the pandemic eventually ebbs. But there will be a growing level of sophisticated testing for other categories of disease. The first silo that we've been building out is, of course, the sexually transmitted infections. And we've developed as well the leading edge controls for human papillomavirus testing, specifically the high-risk strains of HPV. And that's a product that is certainly well recognized by the leaders in this field. And as with COVID, we're expecting to see over the coming months formal recommendations from some of the large diagnostic test manufacturers for that their end users use Microbix products for third-party quality control support. And on the 15th, we announced the creation of another product in that STI category, namely for testing for Mycoplasma genitalium. And this is a very common cause of urinary and reproductive tract infections, chronic inflammation that causes not just discomfort, but can often cause infertility as well. And Mgen, being a very slow-growing organism and difficult to culture ex vivo, has meant that control materials haven't been available for Mgen. Without control materials, you can't really confirm whether the labs are proficient or whether the tests are valid. Therefore, they're not reimbursed. Therefore, there isn't a lot of Mgen testing. And we identified this as an opportunity, created control materials for it under our QAPs programs, and will enable the growth of a whole new segment of diagnostic testing that will be similar in scope to the potentially to the $500 million market for HPV testing. So you can imagine that some of the major diagnostics companies see building of whole new opportunities as a great reason to be working and engaged with Microbix. So we're not just a COVID company or a COVID play. This is a lot broader and a lot deeper. And with that, I'm going to jump over a little bit to the VTM project. And Deborah, please give me some time checks now and again if you feel I'm going too deep on any of these matters. The other thing I'll mention is the viral transport media project that we've undertaken with Ontario. And this is very important. We produce media by the barrel, and we produce if not hundreds, if not thousands, certainly hundreds of barrels of very complex media every year in our production. And we know how to do this. We have the quality systems to do it. And we identified the real need for a secure local supply of high quality, what's called viral transport media. And this is the vial of liquid. It's usually an 8 to 10 centimeter high vial containing 2 or 3 milliliters of liquid. And this is what the swab goes into when it's snapped off at the little break point, and you see the swab going into the vial. That's viral transport media. And what it does is stabilize the virus, preserve it so that it is intact and present when the sample can be tested in the clinical lab. And it doesn't, it involves the higher throughput instruments and the PCR based testing. And Ontario, as many jurisdictions have had to do, are cobbling together whatever from wherever to support their testing programs. And many of the product much of the product is not up to snuff, frankly. And each lot of every shipment has to be tested independently to verify that it works, verify that it is what it says it is. And this is a big burden, a further burden on the system. And of course, if you're bringing in product from other jurisdictions, even if it's great product, the challenge is if that jurisdiction runs short, they're not going to let it come here. So there's a screaming need for domestic production of VTM. We identified, we engaged with the Ministry of Economic Development, Job Creation and Trade of the province of Ontario through, and were directed into the Ontario Together Fund program. Our project was selected to move forward. There was a process of due diligence, I'm pleased to say, conducted by the provincial government. Good to know that they're doing their job. A process of negotiation of terms, reaching a mutually satisfactory contract agreement, followed by the announcement of this program on October 13th with the 1.45 million in funding, grant funding. That is not a loan, that is a grant provided to Microbix. And we're now moving into the implementation phase of that project with validation, providing validation samples to Public Health Ontario, and moving to scale up and secure our supply chain with the manufacturing to take place in the newly constructed spaces at our second site at 235 Watt Line, the QAPs manufacturing and administration building that is adjacent to our hot biological facility at 265. So this is incredibly important. I just want to emphasize for the response, any shortage of viral transport media means that PCR testing for COVID-19 disease can't be conducted. And Ontario currently, to my knowledge anyway, has no domestic manufacturer of VTM. That is going to be Microbix, and in very short order. The sales potential of this is quite dramatic for us, and I'm a little bit chagrined by our communications that maybe this hasn't fully sunk in for shareholders. So I'm delighted to do this webinar today to explicitly call this out. You know, Ontario's daily testing volumes are fluctuating pretty wildly right now, but they've ranged recently from 20 to 40,000 tests per day. And clearly with the lineups and constraints on testing, there's a need to increase that. And the targets set, as communicated to us, have been on the order of 60,000 tests per day. And every one of those tests, as currently conducted, requires a vial of VTM to be done. And we're gearing up to be a very significant portion of that production. I can't say that Microbix or that Ontario is going to provide all of its production or all of its supply needs to Microbix, but I do believe we will be a very, very significant supplier to the province we're gearing up initially for our supply chain integrity at a level of 10,000 units a day, and that will be underway by early calendar 2021. And by that, I mean very early. We're talking January would be a timeline that I'm very comfortable representing. We're then moving to full automation of production to enable us to scale to a level of 60,000 units a day, and that is the request of the province and the target of the program, and that is geared for before the year end of our fiscal 2021, as soon as possible, frankly, is the timeline. The normal time pricing for VTM is in the range of $4 to $6 a vial, and that's sort of the range we're targeting. We don't want to be, war profiteers in this regard. It just doesn't fit with our morality, and we want to remain a primary supplier to the province after COVID, not, be in a position where we're being told not to let the door hit us on the way out after the pandemic, but that this is a true win-win for everybody involved, including the taxpayer. So we'll be producing producing imminently, and our batch size that we're gearing to is 50,000 vials. So we'll be looking to complete that in December and be actually providing product to the province in the new year. And I think if you do the math, you're going to shake your head a little bit on this and say, wait a minute, am I reading this right? Yes, you are. 10,000 times 5 is $50,000, and that would be per day in terms of the sort of magnitude we're looking at, and that might grow fivefold or sixfold from there. Certainly we'll look to pass on savings to the province from automation, and there'll be an open dialogue between us and the procurement authorities about this. But certainly it's understood that we're not doing this as a registered charity, and that we are looking to make an acceptable gross margin off of our expertise, our effort, and our help. But happily, this should be a better quality product, a more secure supply, and at least as good a price as the province is now paying. So that's certainly our target. Maybe a little higher initially as we're producing in a semi-automated fashion, but we're looking at this in a very responsible way. And this is a very large opportunity for us. So really what we see is certainly we've had a lot of challenges like everybody else planning and executing during a pandemic year, but we have 3 now very tremendous opportunities in our antigen business, which is the foundational $1 billion a month principally that we're driving for now. Our QAPs production is scaling now into the order of tens of thousands of units per month, which is again at certainly higher pricing than the VTM. Our QAPs products, for example, our COVID-19 QAPs is a list price on the order of $35 US, about $50 Canadian per unit. So you can start to do the math. There are a selection of products around that, but that's gearing to be providing revenues on the order of $1 million a month as well. And the VTM, depending on what level of production Ontario sources from Microbix, could be anywhere from $1 million a month to $5 million. So we're looking at some very considerable opportunities, transformative opportunities. I'm not offering firm projections, but we see certainly the capability of potentially tripling our revenues as an exit rate going out of fiscal 2021 and might well exceed that level. So those are the sort of targets we're gunning for And none of this requires a tripling of costs to accompany that that scale of increase in revenues. We have the infrastructure and gearing for that. We'll want to add some hands, certainly in manufacturing, QC for product release, QA for documentation, but you're not going to see a level of bloat from an administrative point of view with the company. So I believe that serves our shareholders extremely well. And frankly, I'm sort of chuckling at the lack of reaction to the share price. And I understand that there's a level of skepticism, is this really happening? And I can say, yes, it really is. So, our opportunities are continuing to expand, adding in the VTM supply to Ontario to our QAPs and our antigens is fantastic. And while I haven't put slides up here in this deck about Kinlytic urokinase, that project remains very much active with regards to partnering discussions, and I'm very hopeful that we'll be able to bring together a very acceptable partnership for moving Kinlytic urokinase, our clot-buster drug asset, forward as well, which would even further enhance our revenue and earnings potential for the company. So again, we're very seriously driving things forward. We've been just working our tails off through the entire year, and I can't say enough about our team and putting this together. I might, be the talking head, but we have an incredible group of people, professionals that are doing fantastic work, and I can't compliment them enough. So what we're driving to, other than adding VTM in it, this slide hasn't really changed. We're still, working to drive revenues, increase and move to consistently positive and growing net earnings, extract value from partnering, and drive share price appreciation. So again, Microbix, make no mistake, is a very real business. We have opportunities that are expanding in front of us, and we're triaging them successfully, and we're going to do further work in that regard to make sure we continue to select the right opportunities and pursue them in the right order. We have very responsible and I believe capable, you can be the judge of that though, management group with controls in place. And we believe we're investable, and we're going to get more and more investable going forward. So with that, I'd thank everyone and invite any questions that Deborah has been receiving or fielding.
Thanks, Cameron. That was a really good update and product overview. So with all this capacity, what are you going to do with it? What is a reasonable order run rate from the Ontario government?
Well, we want to be at the 10,000 vial a day scale as soon as possible. There's certainly, everybody's supply chains are cracking in different places. We are looking at every element of our capabilities to make sure that we're producing at the correct level. Excuse me, I'm just going to exit something here. That we're producing at that level consistently. 10,000 a day across a 5-day week is 50,000. That would be our batch size, and we'll be looking to do one such batch a week initially. With we have already received funds from the Ontario Together Fund, and we have already been purchasing the equipment to bring that in, install it, and qualify it as soon as possible for use. We will be providing samples to Public Health Ontario for them to validate that they like it, that it's working properly across labs in mid-November. And certainly I'd be targeting first delivery as soon as possible thereafter. So, that's what we're doing. It's now. This isn't your classic, clinical drug development that, call me in 5 years and I'll have data for you. This is, we're going to be selling product, certainly if not by year end, certainly in January.
Okay, so also from the audience. So if I'm hearing you correctly, you're saying 40 to 45 million dollars a year in sales, up from 12 million. And what are the overall margins on that?
Well, we're I don't know where the 45 came from, but I mentioned that I would see potentially us moving to $1 million a month in VTM and $1 million a month in CAPs through the period of fiscal 21. Looks very attainable right now. In terms of our margins, our margins for antigens has been one of the frustrations that's been quite variable based on product mix and yield mix. We're dialing that in successfully, and I'd like to see antigen revenue and antigen margins closer to the 60% range than sometimes the 40% range they've been as low as based on product mix alone. So we are making good progress on that. The CAPS products, we've, I think, consistently said that we're targeting margins superior to our antigen business ambitions. Certainly, you don't introduce new products with the objective of having lower margins than the existing business. So, we would certainly be looking at CAPS margins superior to 60%. And I think for VTM, we'll see what our costs come out with and talk about that freely with Ontario. But we're not selling lemonade at the street corner here. We have to have a good margin associated with these products. So, I would like to see margins, around the 50% mark for BTM, and we'll see where that goes. But it may be lower margin initially as we're semi-automated and move up from there, or maybe we are more consistent across that, and we'll have to see where Ontario is comfortable with the procurement side.
Okay, you're speaking about gross margins. Can you comment on EBITDA margin?
EBITDA margin, I mean, if we look at our last sort of normal fiscal year, which was fiscal 19, 2020 is a bit of, is quite unique. I'm sure anybody looking at multiple equities knows that, everybody's normal has been changed by the pandemic. But in fiscal 2019, we had sales of 13.5 million, and we're a little bit north of break even on earnings for the year. So, that came with about 6.5 million in SG&A, R&D, and interest costs, and about 6.5 million in gross margin dollars available. I don't see a big increase in our SG&A, R&D, and interest costs. Maybe as we scale and we need to support a little more, we might move up by $500,000 to $1 million in that collective product category. So you're really looking at most of the incremental gross margin dollars falling to the EBITDA line. So that could be quite exciting for everyone. If we go, let's say if we had a 36 million run rate exit, if you had a 50% margin, you've got 18 million in margin dollars to support maybe 7.5 million of SG&A, R&D, and interest costs. It's not hard to see the company moving into some very material net earnings. So, but I'd leave that to the analysts. We have Chelsea Stullick from Industrial Alliance Securities covering us. There's another group, independent group, that we've contracted to do some research, some equity analysis of the company. A gentleman by the name of Bruce Krugel, I expect, will shortly be issuing some of his own independent views on that. But I leave it to those folks to do analysis. It's not my job to project, other than to tell everyone what we're doing and what we're seeking to accomplish.
Okay. And then just talking about the plant expansion, what will be your full capacity once you've got that expansion fully completed?
Well, we will be able to support the 60,000 units a day of VTM, and we're gearing up to be able to do 10,000 units a day of caps. And the caps, we sold, for example, the swab-based caps, we sold a little over 10,000 units of swab-based caps in fiscal 20. Don't hold me to that, but that's the ballpark number that I've been receiving as we're going through our year end. We're looking at more than that per month now, and we will probably be moving into the range of 50,000 units a month at some point in the next fiscal year, and there are discussions that may need to go up tenfold. So the opportunities are quite considerable. There's about another 1,500 square feet of space we can co-opt from 235 watt line before we literally run out of staging warehousing area there. So if we need to build that out, we will, but we've literally just completed the build out of a lockering room, a cold room, still waiting for the compressor on that, but that'll come. And manufacturing, large manufacturing suite, and a large additional QA and QC and product development labs in 235, and that just deburdens us. So altogether, we've got 14,000 square feet in our own biologicals facility, and there's good flexible spaces there. They're also licensed, and then we have 10,500 square feet in our second building. It's a combination of administrative and production and warehousing spaces there.
Okay, so you're talking about exit run rate next year of like 36 to 40 million is where you sort of saw.
That's, yeah, I would, you're always wanting to exceed that, but what we're seeing on the ground, if we were at 10,000 units a day only for VTM, that would be 50,000, call it 50,000 a day, 250,000 a week. That's $1 million a month run rate there. And then on our VTM or our caps, what we see in terms of demand, combination of diagnostics OEMs growing, PT demand growing, and clinical lab demand through our distributors growing, I think we can do as much again on that. And there are potential work there to move to multiples of that on both VTM and caps. So there's considerable upside on both. I have great respect for the challenges of executing on these opportunities, but certainly that run rate, I believe, is quite doable.
Okay, and one of our participants has a question about what that capacity could be in terms of numerical values. So back of the envelope calculation shows plant expansion can generate about 200 million in revenues.
That would be correct. Yes. So, this is, we didn't get all dressed up for nothing.
Sounds like you've got quite a bit of capacity growth that you could have. So.
We do. The magnitude of some of the opportunities and the scale, when you're talking about supporting international diagnostics companies that have 10,000 or 10,000 instruments in the field, they start recommending your products, and every user says, "Oh, I'll buy 20 of those." Well, suddenly you're looking at 10,000 times. That's 200,000 units you could be called to supply in fairly short order. So these numbers start to get eaten into. Your capacity starts to get eaten into very quickly as this gains momentum. For example, if we have a diagnostics OEM, and if they're buying product and providing it to their users, well, then there's suddenly 1,000 labs that have never heard of Microbix that suddenly get a box with great products with Microbix blazoned all over them. What proportion of those companies turn around and go, hey, these work great. I want to order these for my my regular QMS quality management system needs. Wow, that can snowball fast. And that's, what we've been preparing for. The challenge we've had, of course, is predicting, how fast the snowball starts to build and this how fast it starts to roll and how fast it starts to grow. But we don't want to be caught short that we've created, brilliant new product categories and then can't supply them. That's just inviting, inviting somebody else to step in the gap.
Okay, and how do you intend to fund your half of the capacity expansion?
Well, if we had to write a check today, we could, and it would clear. So that's a good position for us. As a cash generating company, we could cash flow this out. We can use our existing credit line, for example, and cash in the bank. The other thing, of course, is we still have for the CAPS portion of this, and the Ontario Together Fund grant is not just for VTM, it's also to support automation of CAPS. We still have access to the FedDev Ontario program of the federal government, where we have access to up to $2.7 million. I'd have to check with Jim Curry as to what we've already consumed on that, but that provides an interest-free loan, a 10-year interest-free loan for up to 60% of, average of, just thinking level of FedDev, sorry, it's not my mind, but let's call that a significant percentage of costs that can be borrowed back on the FedDev Ontario loan. So, hey, we can always use more working capital. That's, with the scale of growth that we're looking at. But do we have an absolute need? No, we don't. So, I won't say never, but I will say we absolutely do not have to raise funds to execute on this project.
Okay, great. And then is VTM an Ontario only play, or is there a larger domestic market of some magnitude? How do you plan on addressing that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and we haven't had the opportunity really to pursue that yet. This is all, if you think we only announced the Ontario agreement on the 13th. So, and we're gearing for that scale, but the capability of it, there is the ability to export any surplus beyond Ontario's needs. And certainly we welcome dialogue, for example, with other provinces, if they wanted to tap Microbix to further supply them. Whether or not they want to provide funding as Ontario has is a question we'd have to look into. But I'd certainly like, as a Montrealer by birth and family there and lots of friends around the country, I'd love us to be able to help other provinces. But right now, our first duty is to Ontario and to getting up to take some of the burden off initially at the 10,000 unit per day level, moving to 60,000. But if anybody wanted us to go in parallel, there's absolutely nothing that would stop us other than a roofed space from providing similar support to Quebec, Alberta, BC, or other provinces.
And does the grant provide the province with a first call on production?
Yes, it does. Most certainly. The Ontario has first call on production, and it'll be to the officials there. What proportion do they want us as a secure, high quality domestic supplier to provide them, versus keeping some channels open and other relationships open with other groups. That's how I would play it anyway.
Okay, and then moving on to urokinase, which I apologize, Cameron, I'm not sure if you mentioned on this call, so maybe you want to give a little bit of a background on what urokinase is, and then I have some questions related to that.
I did. That is still very active. We have multiple interested parties under confidentiality agreements with who have expressed interest in moving forward on the project. You can imagine that everybody's budgeting and planning is in flux given COVID. So the question there is for those parties to complete their 2021 planning cycles in order to confirm that they can move forward with a project that's going to be a $20 million spend to get to the supplemental BLA filing, and then another 10 to $15 million to build launch inventory and do launch marketing. So it's not a trivial amount of money. It's still too big for us to take on our own. But incredible irony that if the urokinase would be absolutely fantastic in from a clinical perspective in treating some of the complications of COVID-19 disease, including pulmonary embolism and distal clots. It's unfortunate that the drug isn't available right now. And of course, our very focused project has not been on the systemic uses of the drug. It's been on the catheter clearance sub-indication as a very lower risk and lower expense means of bringing that skew of the drug back. But its relevance is certainly not diminished one iota.
So if you were funded for $20 million by a partner, how long until commercial production could begin?
It would be 2.5 years to the filing of the supplemental BLA, and revalidation of production would be happening all in parallel to that. And then you'd be looking at 10 months or so for an FDA review following that. So your first commercial sale would be around the 3.5-year mark from the inking of an agreement and the funding of the project team.
Okay. And with the potential free cash flow that you might generate from the 3 times increase in 2021 sales rate, would you consider funding the production of urokinase on your own?
That would be a board level decision, and it's not been discussed. Let's make some of the money before we start to look at spending it all. So my certain viewpoint would be that we would still want to partner in this project, but we would certainly be in a stronger position on our terms. And even from that perspective, I think the work that we've done on QAPs showing the real bench strength of our company and corporate capabilities, as well as Ontario entrusting us to become a critical supplier to the province, speaks well in any partnership discussion, any due diligence processes that people are undertaking, that we're a serious bunch of people and we do what we say we're going to do.
And what kind of sales opportunity is urokinase, like maybe 3.5 years out?
Wow, that's big. The 2019 IQVIA, that's the old IMS for folks may not have seen the name change, but their market data in the US is that Genentech's TPA and the CathFlow Activase, that's the catheter format, sold $350 million US in the US only. And our agents and advisors indicate that usually for a hospital-based product, sales are about 30% higher because the hospitals don't report as well as standalone pharmacies. So you might be looking at a $450 million market for that product. We'd be going in to change that monopoly into a duopoly. So, with that market growing at 8 to 10% a year, by the time we get out there, there's every reason to expect that could be a $250 million drug initially. And if there were some phase 4 work to expand it from clearing blocked catheters to using it prophylactically as well to prevent the emergence of clots and biofilms that lead to infections. It could be as much as $500 million a year in sales just in the US. So you can imagine any kind of reasonable economic split between us and a partner would make it incredibly lucrative and damn important to bring it back from a patient care perspective. So it's not just about the money. This is a safe and effective drug that deserves to be out there.
And those dollar figures that you're giving for urokinase are in US dollars?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And just to be clear, the rest of the figures you discussed today were in Canadian?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Thank you. Good point.
Sometimes I'm paying attention, Cameron.
Good fun.
So I really just have one last question from the audience, which is on share price performance. Maybe you can speak to why you don't think that the market's really appreciating what's going on with Microbix right now.
Well, no one had any knowledge that outside the company and outside the province of what we were doing on the viral transport media. So, while we try to incorporate information into a news release, for example, not everybody's reading a news release. People are busy dealing with their own, lives in pandemic matters. So I'm not at all surprised to see a bit of delay in recognition of what this really means to the company and to the province. So this is very important to do this webinar today, and also for some of the incremental products. For us to go from creating a category-leading quality product for COVID nucleic acid testing for the PCR testing, and then turn around and do the same thing for COVID antigen testing. It's now emerging. There's 6 products have emergency use approval in the United States. None yet in Canada, but that will be the next wave, and we'll be right on top of that as well. So again, speaking to the credibility that I hope we're building with shareholders, and I know we're building with collaborators and customers. So it takes a little while to sink in. It's a wonderful thing about small cap markets; they are not efficient. So it takes a little bit of while, and frankly, as soon as we release the special blackout, watch SETI, and you're going to see me as a buyer.
Great. Well, I think it's pretty miraculous what Microbix has been able to achieve this year in addressing some of the testing needs around COVID-19 in such a short time frame. So thanks to you and the management team, and Bill Gassel, who recently retired. We'll include him in that. It's been a real pleasure to work with the company for the last 3 years, and it does feel like you're really at a turning point. And I think the market's going to wait for you to deliver on results. So can you outline a few catalysts that investors can watch for to sort of check off the list of, setting up some milestones and then achieving them? Because I think that's what's really going to get you recognition in the market going forward.
Absolutely. I some things to watch for. We announced the creation of the first COVID-19 caps in the spring when we created the prototype, because nobody had such a product, and we saw the importance. But we didn't have distribution in place, of course, at that time. This time for the COVID antigen control, we've announced not just the creation of the product, but we've announced material sales of the prototype, never mind what we could achieve with the registered product or what we will achieve with the diagnostic OEMs. So I think we'll aim to announce some material sales of caps to substantiate that this is real and happening. We'll certainly announce the first sales of viral transport media to the province as that comes together as well. And, we're continuing to target further new product development and registration, and you'll see that also. And of course, with any Kinlytic discussions, we'll announce if we have a binding LOI, which isn't usually the way you proceed, or a definitive agreement on that. So, I do encourage people, shareholders, to look through our disclosure history on our website or on CDAR, and you'll see we're not messing around. We're doing a lot. We're getting a lot done, and these are not puff piece news releases. We announce things when they're real, and with that, we'll continue to do that as we complete additional concrete value building developments.
Great. Well, I don't see any more questions from the audience, so I think we can leave it there. Thanks so much for providing an update, Cameron. And the stock did tick up a little bit during the call, so I think it's trading at 30 cents. I'm poor, so I only have delayed quotes, so maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, it's an interesting time for Microbix, and I think that you should start to get some real recognition in the market in the coming months. So.
Well, thank you very much, Deborah, and I thank everybody for taking their time out of their busy day to sit in on the call today. And do follow up with Deborah or us directly if there are questions arising from the call. I hope it's clarified things and gives you better knowledge of the many things we're doing to advance the company.
Yeah, well, I look forward to hearing about the next STI or whatever that we all have that you're helping us with.
Yeah, gosh, enlightened self-interest. Yeah, there you go. All right.
Well, thank you so much. Everyone have a great day. And I will make this replay available on our YouTube channel. Thanks.
Fantastic. Always a pleasure, Deborah, and thank you, everyone.